So the last session was about learning opportunities and how to write them. The learning opportunities should translate fairly straightforwardly into the index of evidence. Now, people will be used to keeping indexes of evidence, so on and so forth, but really our aim over the course is to ensure that the depth and breadth of evidence that the apprentice has would stand up to external scrutiny, that there would be no doubt that the apprentice would have sufficient evidence over the 3 years to demonstrate that they can do the job. So here I'm just going to familiarise you with the index of evidence and guide the apprentice on how to record their evidence. Really at level 4, what we're trying to do is inculcate good habits so that the apprentice gets used to doing these things and they become routine. So if we do them at a simple level from the start, they'll be able to build on that over time. Of course, pretty much designed about that. As I say, one of the shorter sessions, the apprentice will gather evidence, establish good habits, and make sure the evidence stands up to any internal or external scrutiny. And you know what social work is like. There is going to be scrutiny of some description. So what is it? It's a record of all relevant activities the apprentice undertakes. It should be aligned against the appropriate professional standards. And for the first term, that is September to December, it's readiness for direct practice. In the new year, they then move on to end of first placement, and we introduce the apprenticeship standards. Now, I'm not going to talk about the apprenticeship standards in any detail today because there will be a session towards the end of the year that will talk about them. Again, it will be quite brief, but you will have the documents to refer to so you know what that's about. So this is kind of what it looks like. So you have a kind of a little bit of a spiel here talking about various elements of it. But really, the key things are here that you don't have to evidence every single thing you ever did. So it's the quality of the evidence that we're looking at rather than the quantity. That's the first thing. The other thing, however, is, and it's worth bearing in mind, that some of the evidence may just support what the apprentice might take for granted they can do at this stage. We have to guard against that a little bit. The apprentices are generally good, and I keep on saying this, but here we go again. Are generally good at forming and maintaining relationships, and they have good communication skills, things of that nature. Just because they take that for granted doesn't mean they shouldn't evidence it. So let's be judicious about it and pick good examples, but let's make sure that that appears in the evidence as well. They don't have to submit in their portfolio any work products or anything of that nature. So the evidence becomes quite important as a way of being able to track that evidence and to say that it is there. And as a mentor and sub-regional assessor, you're actually asked to sign that off on a fairly regular basis. So I would suggest have a brief conversation with the apprentice if you're a mentor, at least about once a month, just to make sure that the person is doing it. There's an old cliche, what gets looked at gets done. And, we want to get them used to this. You follow GDPR requirements scrupulously. No PLE details should appear in or details that might identify a PLE anywhere. That include case record numbers, because people will sometimes take it directly from their case recording system. That's too close to identifiable, so we don't do that. So we have a number of abbreviations. These are just suggestions. You might do your own thing. That's okay. As long as you're consistent about it, it can be fine. And also, you should number them. So if I have, for example, supervision notes, which, will be just kind of standard issue, a lot of the time that's where a lot of the reflection about cases might come from. So it'll be, let's say, PCF 6. But you just have supervision note in the index of offence reflected on case. I don't know what supervision note it is, so you kind of need to number them. So it might be SUP 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever it happens to be. So try to make it clear the link between my index and where the evidence is in the real world. So they are, of course, submitted to the portfolio. Essentially, the way it really works is with the reviews and other things. For reviews, we generally ask the mentor to be doing that with the apprentice. We'll have another session about reviews. But at the end of the year, it is always the SRA who does the overall final assessment. And one of the key pieces of evidence, of course, is going to be the index of evidence. So, there's kind of many reasons why, as I say, we should be doing this. Also avoid the PCF 1 to 9 thing. So a lot of time pieces of work do cover a whole range of PCFs, and arguably sometimes they do cover 1 to 9. But then that makes it very hard to distinguish why is this piece of evidence important. So really the trick is to try to align it against the standards where the link is strongest. So it might be PCF 2 for 7, for example, their numbers are available. But tighten it so that it's kind of pretty clear, really. Here's just examples of standard abbreviations. They are actually supplied on the template for the evidence. It should be fairly straightforward, really. It's hardly worth talking about. The columns look a bit like this. In year 1, they have the PCF levels. It might look something like this, only there needs to be a little bit more detail in some of these, I think. But there's an example of just the kind of things that you might be saying. And here's a slightly more worked out example. So this is correct observation 1. Significant learning for me here about preparing for the visit of the operation, the observation. I was in a hurry to get there, didn't read the file properly. I think we've all been there, eh? This meant I missed important information. The PLE got quite irritated by this. Apologized to PLE and discussed with mentor afterwards. So here I know what happened. I know what kind of processes were involved, and I know what the learning is. So that's links to those PCFs. Yeah, you could argue it differently, but I think those PCFs are pretty fair game. But that's really what I want to see going through the index as a whole. And then at the end, of course, we sign it off. Surprise, surprise. Now, when you are signing it off as a mentor, of course, you're saying it's a true record of what actually occurred. Now, I don't think anybody's going to cheat on the index of evidence, but at the same time, we are making a judgment. We are making a professional judgment that's contributing to the overall assessment of our apprentice, and therefore it's really quite important. So that's really it for the index. There's not really much more to say. You may have questions, but I'm going to stop the recording now. And then if